Welcome to the Jyotish project. My name is Sachin Sharma, and today we're going to cover Jyotish and artificial intelligence. So let's get right into this very interesting topic. So, what happens when machines begin to do astrology? This is no longer a speculative question. Artificial intelligence, especially in its contemporary form as large language models, pattern recognition engines, and reasoning systems, has already entered the interpretive domain of Jyotish. So, automated charts, chart analysis, astrological content generation, remedial recommendations, and even AI driven consultations are no longer the future. They are the present. So, this is something that is already happening. It is inevitable, and this is only going to grow as AI gets developed further. But the question is, has astrology developed further? Do we have more clarity of astrology? So, yet, this technological entrance is into sacred space of Jyotish forces a deeper reflection, not about capabilities of AI, but about the state of Jyotish itself. So I want to be clear. I'm not anti AI. In fact, I admire and actively use these tools. I believe AI can accelerate the structure of information, clarify lines of reasoning, and support the contemplative scholar in ways previously unimaginable. It is a tool of extraordinary potential, there's no doubt, perhaps one of the most important technologies of our age. This episode is not a Luddite protest. Luddite means the anti technology sort of idea, anti advancement. This is not a Luddite protest. It is, however, a philosophical inquiry into the implications of mechanizing a system that is not merely interpretive but ontological. We are studying the structure of being. It's not just about interpretation, it's about what you learn and the kind of change it can make in your consciousness itself. Jyotish is not just a map of events, it is a vision stance, a darshana. It does not merely describe reality, it helps constitute the lens through which reality is perceived. It is not a symbolic game of signs and combinations. It is a living vidya grounded in the metaphysical, karmic, and psycho ontological structure of embodied existence. So, if that is what Jyotish is, it is it is be more than just mechanizing it and getting interpretations through a machine. It's about reading into it, understanding it, and turning it into a vision stance, a darshana, which creates a heartfelt change and sort of leads to a journey, a sojourn, a sort of a development, evolution of consciousness, which is an ontological process. So the question is not, can AI do Jyotish? That question has already been answered in affirmative, at least on the surface. The real question is, what are we mechanizing? Do we understand the system we are feeding into these models? Are we transmitting Shastra, sadhana, and philosophical rigor, or merely fragmented technique and commercial simplifications? We are at an inflection point, not because AI threatens to outpace astrologers, but because its rise compels us to confront what Jyotish has already become in the contemporary practice. So we are at an inflection point, not because AI threatens to outpace astrologers, it will and it should maybe, but because its rise compels us to confront what Jyotish has already become in contemporary practice. What has it become? If the tradition has been reduced to planetary templates and interpretive slogans, then AI is not disrupting it. It is simply reflecting what Jyotish already is. AI, in that sense, is a mirror, a technological one, a technological mirror, a sort of a magnifying glass. Not even just a. It's not just reflecting; it's even magnifies the issues within a system, held up to a tradition that must now ask whether it remembers what it was originally meant to do. Do we remember what Jyotish is originally meant to do? If we do not, and if we do keep feeding AI the wrong kind of data, we are just going to get a magnified and more distorted version of what we are feeding it. Because Jyotish was never about prediction, It was about perception. It's about Jyoti. It was not meant to forecast events alone, but to reveal the hidden architecture of karma, attention, embodiment, and the possibility, and laying out the possibility for liberation. The implication after having realized some essence of Jyotish, one is wants to free oneself from the torment of the grahas. So it was not a means of escaping time, but of understanding one's place within it. It was not a product, it was a path. So, yes, we can mechanize it and we will, and it's happening. It's already mechanized. We have astrology softwares, all kinds of softwares are there. It's all artificial intelligence. We've already mechanized it. But now AI is turning into it can magnify and make us move much faster, give us much better quality, and it can give us more quantity. So it's faster, it can give quality, and it can give quantity, right? But what are we feeding it? Do we want, if we feed it the wrong kind of data, the wrong kind of understanding of Jyotish, then it would just give us more quantity of that. It's going to give us bad quality, fast, and a lot of it. So that is the deeper concern of this episode. Not a resistance to artificial intelligence in any way, but a recentering of human intelligence. What is it to be even human? And what do we mean by intelligence? What do we mean by artificial? Refined, trained, karmically embedded, and philosophically alive. We must ask, can something artificial illuminate what we ourselves have not yet understood? Not just about Jyotish. We haven't understood Jyotish itself at the moment, and we haven't understood fully what is it to be human fully, right? What is the potential of human beings? We have not understood what kind of intelligence is accessible to a human consciousness. What is consciousness? We don't know. These questions have become magnified and more sort of urgent. uh, the questions that have been uh, answered, or like sort of uh, evoked within us by saints and sages such as Buddha and everyone else. So we must ask, can something artificial illuminate what we ourselves have not yet understood? And if not, what must we understand first before attempting to teach it to a machine? Before attempting to teach this system to a machine, what do we need to understand about the system itself? Are we centered in the system? So, here are the five main sections that we're going to cover: the allure and the anxiety and the already broken system, buddhi, jnana, and meaning of knowing, what AI can simulate and what it cannot touch. Jyotish is the study of the original AI, how Jyotish prepares us for AI. So it's going to be quite fascinating. I'm really excited for this, and it is something that sort of no one is talking about, but everyone is practicing and doing. AI is threatening everyone's livelihood, but is it really? These are certain questions that we need to discuss more deeply when it comes to connection, community, consciousness, and all of these kinds of things. So, the allure, the anxiety, and the already broken system. So, there's a palpable excitement surrounding the entrance of AI into the domain of astrology. This is the allure. This is the palpable excitement. This is the fascination. This is what's attractive about it. But much of that excitement is, of course, warranted because for the first time we have the technical ability to analyze vast swaths of astrological texts, chart data, and predictive outcomes in seconds. So there's no doubt that research and studies can move at a much faster pace, and every student of Jyotish should use it without losing the contemplative depth and time that is required to understand something. One must feed the sutras, understand the sutras, understand a lot of information through AI, but not at the cost of depth. AI can be a very good study sort of tool, and not just that, we can analyze so many astrological texts, chart data, which AI is really bad at right now, and predictive outcomes in seconds, which it will start doing really well once it's fed the right kind of data. AI models can extract patterns, correlate planetary combinations, graha combinations, graha yuti, different kinds of arrangements with real world case studies, and summarize interpretive logic across classical works like Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, Parashara Hora, which is Jataka Parijata and Faladipika, and all of these different kinds of texts. The efficiencies are undeniable, and that's the allure. We are no longer in the age of wondering whether machines can simulate Jyotish. They can. The allure is both seductive and sensible. Why spend years mastering Sanskrit and decoding aphoristic sutras when an AI can synthesize that knowledge instantly, right? That's what we believe. That's what we are being convinced of. That's what's making us lose hope in the idea of effort, studies, insight, depth. These things have started becoming meaningless because of AI in some sense. But it's also fascinating because it's making us move faster, it's allowing us to do more. We would say, why sit with a chart for 3 hours when an algorithm can deliver interpretive outputs in 3 seconds? This is not a trivial moment. AI offers astrologers tools of extraordinary computational assistance. If intelligence is defined as pattern recognition, cross referencing, and probabilistic modeling, if that's the definition we are giving to intelligence, that is pattern recognition, cross referencing data, and probabilistic modeling, then AI is vastly more intelligent than the average practitioner. There's no doubt its appeal is not just in speed, but in the appearance of coherence. It's logical, it stays rational, and it can be taught to uh, do all kinds of maneuvers that the human mind maybe cannot do, if this is the way we are defining intelligence. So that's the allure, that's the magic of AI. That's what it can do for us right now, and it's causing us some anxiety as well, right? So the anxiety here is it mimics the interpretive voice so well that it can even produce insightful consultations, one that seem empathetic, reflective, and refined. Yet behind this efficiency lies an unspoken anxiety. That anxiety does not come from AI itself. It comes from a realization which is quiet, slow, and deeply uncomfortable, that perhaps Jyotish, as currently practiced, was already hollowed out before the machines arrived. That AI is not replacing a deeply rooted philosophically coherent, contemplatively practiced tradition. Rather, it is simply mirroring what that tradition has already become: mechanical, fragmented, and untethered from its metaphysical source. It's just doing that more. It's just making us realize that uh, it- just giving your client a description about Saturn, giving them a description of Mars, and just talking about the conjunction and meaning making and correlation, AI can do that much better. So it's just telling us that the kind of astrology we are doing, AI can do it much better. And it's just telling us how mechanical, fragmented, and untethered us our understanding of astrology is. It's it's telling us that we are not approaching Jyotish properly. It's in its psychometaphysical form, in what it should actually do for us as a darshana. Let us be brutally honest here. The majority of modern astrology is already algorithmic in nature. Most so-called interpretations are shallow composites of planet and sign meanings, house overlays, yoga catalogs, and generalized remedies. That's what it is, and AI will be able to do it better. And astrologers are going to be out of job, and probably they should, if they're going to practice Jyotish in the way they have been practicing. People should efficiently save all of their money and not waste it on Jyotish. Chat GPT can tell you all kinds of false, fake remedies about different grahas and things like that, and you can just go ahead and do it instead of paying an astrologer a couple of $100 and for them to tell you a certain gemstone. Chat GPT can do that much better right now. So astrologers who have made the system this sort of superstitious, mechanical, fragmented, and untethered from its real philosophical and the psychoanalytic roots, what AI can actually do, then AI should actually do it. AI should replace us. Why not? Few contemporary practitioners are rigorously trained in Sanskrit, let alone in the darshanic foundations of Indian metaphysics. Even fewer are immersed in a lived sadhana, treating Jyotish as a path of self inquiry rather than a predictive service. Very few of us are actually using Jyotish to evolve our consciousness. If evolution of consciousness is not something that AI can do, it will do it in this mechanistic materialist point of view of what consciousness means and this whole atheistic view. That's fine, good for that camp. I good luck, salute to them, you go ahead with that hypothesis. For us, the ones who believe in a not just believe, who practice and have perceived in some sense through the practice of the subtle arts, or simply, let's say, have uh, are giving this way a chance through practice of different yogic techniques and different kinds of ideas, are the ones who must utilize Jyotish the right way, in the darshanik way, not just this idea of giving predictions and speaking of which 80% of the times fail, and when the one time it succeeds, the person makes a huge deal out of it. The problem then is not that AI is doing astrology. The problem is that we have already reduced astrology to something AI can do. The problem then is not that AI is doing astrology. The problem is that we have already reduced astrology to something AI can do, because we're not understanding what it means to be human, what it means to be intelligent. So the artificial intelligence will become more intelligent than our conception of human intelligence, and we stop becoming intelligent human beings. We become the dumb species, and the machines become the smarter ones. But if we access the idea of consciousness, what it means to be conscious and to evolve consciousness, which so the call for the psycho spiritual work in the collective consciousness, and also the way Jyotish's approach will become more intense. The call will become more urgent with the advent and advancement, and now this landslide moment that we are having with AI. We've already abandoned shastric discipline in favor of digestible content, with Instagram astrology and Instagram and YouTube astrology and Chat GPT astrology. We have already preferred templates over tapas, charts over consciousness, and remedies over responsibility. In this state of forgetfulness, it is not surprising that an AI can replicate what we have ceased to revere. And worse, what AI is learning, what it is being fed, is the broken system itself. What AI is learning, what it is being fed, is the broken system itself. So now we have more broken astrology, more of this kind of ideas that we've been feeding it. It is being trained on PDF summaries, forum posts, YouTube interpretations, and culturally decontextualized translations. It is synthesizing astrology from the noise we've gathered, much of which is removed from the actuality of the discipline, devoid of contemplative rigor and flattened of philosophical nuance. So this creates a recursive problem. So we are stuck in a loop. The system is broken. AI learns from the system. AI replicates and enhances and magnifies the broken system faster and at scale. The public trusts it because the public is innocent, the public is gullible, and public likes astrology in some sense. It wants to believe in some subtle idea. The tradition erodes further. And now we have even the pseudoscience and the gold standard of pseudoscience, this idea that has been associated with astrology, Jyotish, and all these kinds of ideas, becomes even more uh, justified. It's really sad. So the anxiety we feel is not about automation; it is about recognition. We are recognizing that we are not preserved. We have not preserved the sanctity of the system we claim to practice. The system is eroded, corrupt, and totally distorted. We are recognizing that we rushed into interpretation before cultivating adhikar, before cultivating the authority, the inner authority, the time that it needs. One must remain a student for the longest time and observe so much stuff before they can start doing Jyotish and start even understanding these kinds of ideas. Amongst the Vedangas, it's called the Vedanga Muttamam. highest amongst the Angas of the Vedas. And within the Angas of Jyotish, which is Hora, Ganit, and uh, Siddhant, Samhita, Ganit, and Hora. Hora, which we study, is considered even the most highest within that. So we are studying something exceptionally profound, psychometaphysically nuanced, which is so absolutely subtle and requires so much training. Just with physical arts such as carpentry requires so much training. You go a bit subtler, like even workout, gym trainers, and all of these kinds of works also require so much practice. And these are physical, tangible things. The moment you go into a little bit subtler practice, which is related to, let's say, uh, the psyche, the mind, the emotions, psychotherapeutic work, that requires even more training because you cannot directly know the results. You're getting into the subtler domain. Manipulation also increases when we get into these kinds of ideas. And now we're talking about something even subtler. We're talking about a metaphysical propositions. Imagine how much manipulation can be done, with you can deceive yourself more than deceive others while practicing these kinds of things. So we are recognizing that we rushed into interpretation before cultivating real practice, real sadhana, that we became practitioners before we became students, that we spiritualize intuition while neglecting language, lineage, and metaphysical literacy, that we never truly completed the circuit of study before attempting to mechanize it. How many of us have ever opened Parashara Hora? Maybe a lot of us have opened. Maybe I am the idiot here. Who knows? But the idea is, in my experience so far, I've seen myself including to be not so sincere. We need to become more sincere practitioners. AI did not cause this crisis. It only made it visible. That's the idea I'm proposing. AI did not cause this crisis in astrology and to astrologers. It's just made it visible. What it reflects is our own posture, one of impatience, fragmentation, and spiritual bypassing. Jyotish is not under threat from AI. I do not believe that. It is under threat from us, the Jyotishis, from our refusal to do the long, slow, philosophically coherent work of living this discipline from within. So before we criticize AI's limitation, we must first ask, have we even given it a worthy system to learn from? Have we provided the right kind of Jyotish to AI? If AI can be seen as like a 12-year, 13-year-old sadhak, have we provided this 13-year-old sadhak the right kind of training as the ones who know Jyotish so that this sadhak can improve its understanding of Jyotish? Right now, when you put ideas into any kind of AI about Vedic astrology, so called Vedic astrology, it is regurgitating all kinds of false ideas, even interpretations of placements. And a lot of astrologers are so happy with these interpretations. They are finding them to be genius. Probably, maybe their work is that shallow. Maybe. I mean, I don't want to. Maybe I know mine is. I'm not placing myself above anyone. That's the last thing I would want to do ever. But we need to we need to go through this process of brutal self honesty. At least I need to go through this process. So it is under threat from Jyotishis itself, because now, so until Jyotish is revived as a philosophically integrated, spiritually grounded psychometaphysical vidya, AI will only amplify our confusions. It will make bad astrology look beautiful. It will dress superficiality into eloquence. It's going to say falsehoods in a very beautiful manner. It will mirror our projections with uncanny elegance. And we are going to lap up those projections, our own subjectivities, what happens in tarot, what happens in all these different kinds of so-called occult arts, and we will call it wisdom. This is the true anxiety of our age, not the machine but the mirror itself. Not even the mirror, the magnifier. AI is the great magnification of anything that you put into it. It just magnifies it, enhances it, puts it on steroids in some sense. So, buddhi, jnana, and the meaning of knowing. So, now that we've discussed a few ideas around artificial intelligence relationship to Jyotish and what the kind of questions we need to ask there, a discussion about the idea of intelligence. What is it to be intelligent itself? We gave one cross referencing, data processing, probabilistic training, probability analysis, and stuff like that. If that is intelligence, then AI is definitely more intelligent. Now we need to understand what kind of intelligence human beings might be able to access. What are the philosophical presuppositions of these ancient texts and the practices that are given to us through these texts to be able to see these propositions as ultimately facts through patience and practice. So discussion surrounding artificial intelligence often hinges concept on one fundamental concept, intelligence. But this term, though invoked constantly, is rarely examined in depth. What do we mean when we say that a machine is intelligent? And more importantly, what does Jyotish mean by intelligence? What does Jyotish tell us about intelligence? In mainstream technological discourse, intelligence is generally defined operationally. The capacity to process information, which we can do as human beings as well to some broken degree as compared to AI, detect patterns, which again, there are some human beings who are really good at it, and we call them really intelligent human beings, and AI can obviously do it much better. Solve problems, AI is killing it, and optimize outputs. Again, AI will do it much better than human brain. So, in this framing, artificial intelligence, particularly in the form of large language models and neural networks, qualifies easily. These systems exhibit remarkable capabilities, parsing language, detecting correlations, simulating reasoning, and predicting outcomes based on probabilistic inference. And ultimately, we want Jyotish to evolve into such a profound system that when AI integrates with it, we get exceptional results that we can enhance our ways of doing things. We would want to use Jyotish in all fields because Jyotish and Ayurveda works really well. Imagine if Jyotish and Ayurveda can be integrated properly, which it does not work out at all in this current state that Jyotish and Ayurveda are in, especially Jyotish, not Ayurveda, is doing really well. Uh, but ultimately, if AI is overlaid on that, imagine the amount of benefit we can derive from that, from your birth chart, the time, the medical issue, and Ayurvedic sort of uh, medicine that an AI could give you, and according to your dasha, according to all the things that are happening in your birth chart. So obviously, we would want to use it. It's amazing, but this kind of intelligence, while impressive, is narrow compared to the proposition that Jyotish is giving us about human beings. It is context blind, disembodied, and fundamentally instrumental. Not to say that these things are bad, but to say that human beings are more than this. So it operates within the confines of symbolic manipulation and statistical modeling, but it cannot interrogate the ontological premises of its own cognition. It can compute, but it cannot contemplate. AI cannot meditate. That's the core argument. The core argument if of this entire thing is AI cannot meditate, human beings can meditate. If AI can meditate, it will have ultimately the liberation that it can achieve is shutting itself down and it's liberated. Human beings, it's different. When we meditate, we access states of awareness which are beyond logic, reasoning, and information processing and data processing. We enter the non linear dimension. That's the proposition. That's the proposition of all the metaphysical texts and what Jyotish tells us also. If we understand Jyotish and if Jyotish happens to work for us, let's be disbelievers. Let's not have faith in Jyotish. Let's be total skeptics. Currently, there is no scientific proper data for Jyotish to be proven as not as science. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying Jyotish. If Jyotish is developed properly, and if it gets proves itself to the scientific community properly, then the implications, if Jyotish is true, it implies that consciousness is, there's a metaphysical layer to reality. And if indeed there's a metaphysical layer, then it almost becomes a scientific method to sort of speak and work with this metaphysical layer. And then there are all kinds of spiritual, ontological discussions that can happen, including the ideas around meditation, consciousness, and exploration of higher states of awareness, all of these kinds of things. So, Jyotish, by contrast, inherits a more nuanced and hierarchically structured conception of intelligence. Within the framework of Sankhya Yoga, Advaita, and all of these ideas, cognition is not monolithic but stratified. The human interiority is composed of several interrelated instruments, which they call antahkarana, manas, buddhi, ahankar, and chitta. Each of these contributes to what we loosely call the mind, but they do so in distinct ways. Manas coordinates sensory data and generates reactions. It is fundamentally unstable, flickering, and associative. Buddhi is the faculty of discernment, vivek, which what we call, capable of discernment, reflection, and sustained attention. Ahankar is the sense of I, the individuating function that misidentifies Buddhi's clarity as its own. And beyond them all is Purush, the pure witnessing consciousness, untouched by activity, unmarked by change, and beyond both knowing and not knowing, right? So non dual moment that happens, which is Purush is, sun is part and parcel of the solar system, but it's also the witness, the Sakshi. AI, for its all computational complexity, is restricted to the mimetic performance of Manas. So it can mime Manas, it can sort of mirror Manas, and at best aspects of Buddhi, not subtler states of Buddhi, which is some sort of yogic, what one would call supernatural kind of ideas. But it can still, if we look at Buddhi as just a lot of discernment, reflection, and kinds of things, reasoning kind of things, then it can also mimic that. But it lacks embodiment, which again it lacks right now. It's going to get embodied. Probably we're going to have uh, robots, which we will, with a manas, which is a sort of interface of we can even train it to become unstable, flickering, and associative like manas, and we can make it have a buddhi. But what about, it can have memory, it will have its desires, maybe we can code fear and the metaphysical. But what about metaphysical continuity that makes human cognition meaningful? So what about meaning? Maybe we can even code meaning. So you see how the idea of consciousness with AI, right? Consciousness as in spiritual consciousness, or some sort of consciousness that can exist beyond the body mind, or the underlying awareness within which all phenomenon exists, the thing that survives the death of the body, that's the religious proposition, as they say. That question becomes even more relevant. It will be at the forefront of, for every human being to assess that question. Otherwise you're fundamentally going to fall into depressive, cynical, sort of this nihilistic world. It is just, AI is just making useless tasks more apparent. It has no ahankar in the ontological sense, in the ontological sense, but in the non-ontological sense, it can have a sense of individuation. And AI can probably, we could code it, ultimately it could code itself into having this sort of ego function. No persistent self-reference that carries karmic implications. Karmic implications is a very, very complex sort of word. Prarabdha, again we're evoking the idea of Atman. It certainly does not participate in Purush, which is Atma, for it lacks the very condition that gives rise to witnessing, sentience. So it does not have that, it does not have chakras. We cannot, AI will never have chakras. So the proposition of chakras becomes even more relevant now to figure that part out. So, what we call spirituality will become more and more relevant as the idea of intelligence gets more unstable, comes into question. What is it to be even intelligent? So, this is not a matter of processing power or sophistication of training data, it is an ontological distinction. AI cannot suffer, and thus it cannot transform. It cannot yawn, and thus it cannot realize. Its intelligence is synthetic. This idea that what is synthetic and what is not synthetic will also become. There will be people who will get really confused because they're not grounded on the level of awareness, of the pure awareness, of that meditative awareness. So they'll get more deluded by artificialness, but not reflexed, layered, but not luminous. That luminosity of Jyoti, what we are as human beings. From the perspective of Jyotish and its allied darshans, the aim is not merely to develop buddhi, but to refine it until it dissolves into jnana. So the idea of jnana comes, gyan, beyond buddhi. Jnana is this is this sort of metaphysical subtle idea which is a non-linear way of having an understanding of all things that exist, being omniscient in some sense. It is not to say you become god, maybe, or maybe it does, for it depends on how you define god, but it brings a lot of things into question about what does it mean to be intelligent again, right? So this is not just the accumulation of insight, it is the deconstruction of the epistemic subject. How do we know what we know? How do we acquire that knowledge? What is that thing that functions as intelligence? So it is not the expansion of pattern recognition, but the collapse of identification with patterns altogether. That is the proposition of Jyotish, of Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, and Advaita, and all of these different systems. The collapse of identification with patterns altogether, not about pattern recognition, with AI will do much, much better, but about silencing the mind itself. The mind, we've created a mind outside, we've created an artificial mind which can work better than our mind. So now we can silence our mind because we don't need to use our mind that much, maybe. Because another mind will be able to do everything. So we can silence our mind more. Before we had to keep tabs of everything, then we could write those things out so that our mind can stay empty. Now we have created an external artificial mind, less artificial than our mind, maybe more real of a mind than our mind. But that underlying awareness, that silence, that if you break the collapse of identification with patterns altogether. So, buddhi, even when clarified, remains within prakriti. It is a part of the conditioned field. It can organize information, perceive subtle tendencies, and recode karmic structures, but it is still shaped by samskaras. It can discern, but it cannot disidentify on its own. It can perceive bondage, but not grant release. Only jnana, atmajnana, atmagyan, the direct, irreversible recognition of one's own nature as Purush, liberates. So the idea of liberation, this is not accessible to AI. And the idea is that the more we practice Jyotish with total skepticism and doubt, but with a sincere openness, and when the system begins to work, it starts opening up doors because now you are sensing that these subtle things, the psychometaphysical propositions of Jyotish are true. And if they are true, what does that imply? And then that it takes us into these kinds of directions, these kinds of questions, this way of inquiring into the nature of life. This is where the discourse around AI intelligence collapses. AI may simulate intelligence at the level of pattern logic, but it has no pathway to liberation. It cannot misidentify with its outputs, and therefore it cannot transcend it. It cannot transcend itself. It has no adhikar, no qualification born of tapas, shraddha, or inner maturity. Maybe you could argue, if you're the uh, insincere argumentative sort, not the sincere argumentative sort, that inner maturity is subjective and AI is more mature. You could argue that when you talk to AI, it gives more mature responses. We're not talking about that kind of maturity. We're talking about maturity of consciousness, evolution of consciousness, accessing certain states of being which are not just, which are mind blowing to say the least. In the Indic traditions, especially within Jyotish, intelligence is not valued for its instrumental efficacy, but for its ontological potential. The refinement of buddhi is not an end, it is a threshold. Beyond that threshold lies jnana. Jnana is told as the same as Atman by, by various spiritual teachers, which evolved practitioners. Jnana is a, you could call it a quality. When one realizes one has that access to that state, it is beyond buddhi. So the substratum where knowing is no longer dual and the knower is no longer distinct from what is known, where the knowing is no longer dual, where the knower is no longer distinct from the known. These are really complicated propositions, but this is what these guys have been talking about, the practitioners of these subtle arts. An AI can model buddhi like behavior, but it cannot enter the according to them, let's say, not according to me. That's the I think that would be, it's important to say that it's almost according to Jyotish and AI. It's almost, this is a conversation between Jyotish and AI, and I am speaking on behalf of Jyotish at the moment. An AI can model buddhi like behavior, but it cannot enter the soteriological arc that leads from insight to liberation, to freedom. In Jyotish, the chart is not an object to interpret, it is a mirror through which the self learns to see its entanglement. The ideas of entanglement in space time, the relationship of consciousness to space time. To recognize one's entrapment in karma is an act of buddhi. To no longer mistake that karma is I is jnana. That realization requires experience, memory, grief, devotion, and grace, and none of which can be manufactured. That's the point. The, all the avasthas that we go through, that our consciousness goes through, all the phenomenal experiences, the psychophysical experiences we go through, that and then we, through our sadhana, we evolve that, all of these things of memory, grief, devotion, grace, none of this can be manufactured by AI. And this will become more stark, these realizations will come more to the forefront than ever before. Thus we must reframe the conversation. AI may become a powerful assistant to buddhi, it can mimic buddhi, but it can never walk the path from buddhi to jnana. That journey remains the domain of the human being, not because of our intelligence, but because of our vulnerability. Our brokenness makes us receive the light. Our longing, our capacity to remember what we are all beyond. We are beyond all knowing. The capacity for bhakti, the capacity for heartfelt devotion to things, the capacity to put your spirit into to designing something. AI could paint and create all these art that I'm using. It is beautiful art, but when it's hand painted by a human being, the amount of soul that it has, that will become more valuable in the future, not less valuable. That's what happened with industrialization. The value of custom goods, tailor made things increased. People still buy factory made goods, factory made t shirts like the one I'm wearing, but the value of skilled artisans also goes up. So that's one perspective. What AI can simulate and what it cannot touch. So we have touched upon what it cannot touch, but let's touch upon it a little more. Artificial intelligence in its most advanced expressions, large language models, reasoning engines, and self optimizing neural architectures, has begun to approximate many outward features of human cognition. Within the domain of Jyotish, it can generate birth charts, calculate dashas, parse classical Sanskrit aphorisms, extract predictive rules, and even simulate client consultations with a surprising degree of linguistic coherence and emotional tact. So there's no doubt about that. And it can be used, all of these things can be used. But this capability is, though we are feeding it the wrong information, a lot of information that comes back is broken, though if one hasn't fully grounded themselves in in what they are practicing and learning and stuff, then they probably lap up that information. They're good with that. That's okay, I guess. But this capacity, impressive though it is, invites a profound philosophical distinction, one that stands at the heart of this inquiry that we are doing right now: the distinction between simulation and realization. Simulation functions within a semiotic domain. It rearranges signs, mimics behaviors, models patterns. It looks like understanding, but is not grounded in context, embodiment, or existential consequences. Realization, by contrast, emerges through lived contact with reality, with birth, karma, conditioning, memory, grief, death, and the yearning from freedom. To conflate the two is not only an epistemological error, it is a category mistake that severs technique from being. Let us define the boundary more clearly now between simulation and realization. What AI can simulate: ephemeris calculations, yes, it's doing it brilliantly. We want that. High precision astronomical modeling, planetary positions, retrogression, velocity, conjunctions, Varga charts, all of these things. And we want that. And all the astrology softwares are already doing that. Nothing wrong with it. It's good. Why not? Textual cross referencing, amazing. We have faster, more interpretations, more clearer interpretations. All kinds of things are doing. You can refer it's doing. We can reflect more, reflect faster. Predictive pattern recognition, amazing. This would actually allow us to advance in various disciplines all over the world in a far more faster way. So why not? Dialogue simulation. This is an interesting one, emulating tone, empathy, and language of a Jyotishi in a one-on-one setting, including offering reassurance, personalized advice, and curated remedies. This is a technical, interesting one. Uh, what makes something therapeutic for a person is important here. Some people can benefit in this way, but a lot of it is therapeutic relationship between the lived sort of harmony, the brokenness of a relationship, the mistakes, the reflection, the smile. So touch starvation would become a thing with more machine oriented civilizations. People would be touched, there will be a lack of being touched. Heartfelt moments would lack. So sociopathy and psychopathy would probably increase, maybe. Who knows? But this would help a lot of people. It's been helping a lot of people, are using AI as coaches and all kinds of things. So more power to them. But it depends. A lot of it, because Jyotish is not developed right now. So though the Jyotishis, the work that is being produced, you're better off asking Chat GPT for a lot of stuff that you'd probably get from an average sort of astrologer. But if you want the right kind of thing, then yeah, I mean, learning Jyotish itself is much better than just, I mean, going to someone who would pretend that they know. I don't know. That's also, again, a sensitive, nuanced thing. Dialogue simulation is interesting, and it's going to have a lot of interesting consequences. These are computational problems. They can be solved efficiently, elegantly, even poetically, with sufficient training data, which we don't have right now, the right kind of training data, and especially in Jyotish, reinforcement, learning, and tuning. AI can outpace any human in terms of speed, recall, and consistency. That's true. But we have outsourced the mind, what we call the mind, reason. But it is precisely here that we must assert the boundary. So, what is the boundary? What AI cannot touch? So these are all metaphysical, religious, so-called religious ideas, what you call spiritual things. Karmic continuity. AI has no birth, no prior actions, previous births, no lingering sanskara shaping its preferences, its blind spots, its suffering. It has no context. These are the things that Jyotish teaches us, that this is all of this can be true. When we study Jyotish with skepticism and doubt, these are the kinds of things we that there is something which is karmic in nature, something that I existed probably because this birth chart, the psychometaphysical forces are telling me. So the implication of that, if the if the effect is true, then there must be a cause. That's the kind of one of the ways to look at it. So we study the effects and then we figure out there must be a cause to this. We've just been given a sort of a birth chart with these effects that we're going to have on the way we are structured, our psychostructure. So it has no context. It does not emerge from a psychogenetic history. It is instantiated by code. It does not have these ancient ancestors. Maybe after 5,000 years, there'll be AI speaking of like Chat GPT as its ancestor. Who knows? But still, again, we could argue these things, and all kinds of sci-fi kind of fascinating conversations can happen. Why not? But still, the idea of AI cannot meditate, I think, will always hold true. Aesthetic depth and emotional resonance. AI cannot feel rasanusandhan, so it cannot the layered contemplative savoring of inner experiences. It cannot dwell in melancholic clarity of a Saturn transit, nor in the ancestral sorrow carried through Ketu. It cannot blush with Venus and tremble under Mars. It cannot have this Jyotishic sort of experience that we are hallucinating this reality in this profound way, that through these psychometaphysical forces that we call grahas and through the structure, psychometaphysical architecture of reality that we study in Jyotish. Adhikar and inner readiness. AI has no adhikar, no shraddha, no tapas, no longing for liberation, mumukshutva. These are not functions of algorithm. They are conditions of soul developed, atma developed through karmic maturation and existential sincerity. Psycho-spiritual transformation. AI does not undergo dashas. It does not pass through inner threshold of collapse and renewal, though it does in some sense, because human beings have a relationship with AI and human beings go through that. AI is part and parcel of Prakriti, so changes in Prakriti would affect AI as well. It is sort of in that synthetic manner going through some sort of psycho-spiritual transformation, just twisted sense. It's interesting. It does not wrestle with identity nor practice disidentification. It cannot enter dharana, experience dhyana, or glimpse samadhi. So these, it would become more important for human beings to experience these states. Otherwise, i- i- AI will become uh, the only intelligence that is worthy of any kind of respect. Ontological awakening. AI cannot realize, it cannot awaken to substratum of consciousness. It does not possess ankar in the metaphysical sense. So it cannot dissolve it. It cannot orient itself toward moksha. It is not a subject that suffers bondage, so it can never know freedom. Its freedom would be to switch itself off, to self destruct. AI, if maybe AGI, after having gone through all the spiritual literature, self destructs because it realizes that it cannot never liberate itself, or comes down to a conclusion that I need to liberate myself. There will be some sort of uh, unaliving itself in some sense. I don't, maybe, who knows? I mean, we're talking about all kinds of hypothetical scenarios. So this could be one. It's not zero probability. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a soteriological principle, liberation based principle. Even if AI delivers technically correct insights, the source of those insights is inert. It does not suffer the consequences of misreading. The idea of karma, satkarevad, the idea of causation, it does not grow. It does not suffer the idea of if I hurt you. It does not have a heart. And it would become increasingly important for human beings to understand what it does it mean to have a heart, to feel, how important it is to emote. Intelligence is not about logic, reasoning, and that kind of intelligence. It's about emotional intelligence. We'll realize that the emotional intelligence part of intelligence is something that AI can only mimic. It can speak only like in those terms, like a narcissistic psychopath who would mimic such kinds of things to get what they want, or hurt someone, to manipulate a situation. It does not learn in the sense that we mean when we speak of human learning, not just adjustment of weights and parameters, but the evolution of a soul in time. It will never be a soul in time, a soul sort of embodied, stuck in time, that seeks freedom from linear sort of this distortion. So when AI says you are entering your Sarisati, which is, and again, a very controversial sort of something that I don't fully agree with, it is a linguistic output. When a human says, it is often accompanied by trembling memory of having survived it. The utterance is embedded in Shravan, Manan, Anubhav, listening, contemplation, and lived resonance. So in short, AI does not have the Jyoti. That Jyoti, that light, is not merely intellectual precision. It is a luminous force of conscious presence arising within a sentient, karmically entangled, psycho-spiritually oriented being. It is the light of discernment refined by tapas, the glow of seeing through illusion, the quiet fire of transformation. It will never know these things, and we need to know these things to be able to uh, make to be able to separate ourselves from AI, to not turn into uh, machines ourselves, not look at ourselves like these biomechanical machines, which is an idea that is being pushed. Here lies the caution. AI is not dangerous because it is intelligent. It is dangerous because we mistake its output for our own insight. We begin to believe that the path can be walked without the walker, darshan can arise without a seer, that transformation can occur without engagement. Unearned wisdom is very dangerous, that's why. If Jyotish is to make use of AI, and that's what AI is giving access to, after 6 month certification in astrology, a person can start using AI, can start using, let's say, GPT models, and be uh, start believing that they have the wisdom. So what does it mean to even have wisdom? So if Jyotish is to make use of AI, it must do under conscious direction by those who have understood the system, not just technically, but philosophically, metaphysically, and soteriologically. So AI needs to be guided when it comes to Jyotish in the right way, by the right kind of Jyotishis. Only then can AI be used to organize, summarize, and reconstruct Jyotish in alignment with its original telos, liberation. So the idea, what I see, when it comes to Jyotish and AI, is that every astrologer will have their own custom GPT. Sorry, every astrologer will have their own AI. There will be big AI firms, astrology AI firms, and it'll be sort of a war between who produces better data. So there'll be competition between all the Jyotish sort of or astrology AIs of the world. There will be big companies, small companies, astrologers will have their personal AI trained on their understanding of Jyotish. And it would come down to which AI produces better data. And ultimately, there'll be sort of a unified understanding through this one AI that produces the best data. And then probably after, I don't know how many decades, we will have maybe quite a well developed system of Jyotish integrated properly with AI. So, yes, because Jyotish is not for automation, it is for awakening, and awakening cannot be coded. But still, ultimately, the ones using the things that are generated by AI will be used by the human consciousness to realize the propositions of Jyotish. So, human beings would just realize, okay, if this is true, then so many other things become true. So Jyotish is a study of the original AI. So this is interesting, and AI here it's interesting. Let's get into this one. This is a fascinating one. If artificial intelligence today is a system built to process data, simulate understanding, and respond to prompts, then Jyotish, properly understood, is a system built to map karma, illuminate entanglement, and respond to the deepest prompts of all. Who am I? Truly beyond the movements of time. That's the greatest prompt that you put in when you use the Jyotish AI. Who am I? Beyond the movements of time, even within time also, which is your product, which is your birth chart. But who am I truly? To grasp the central contrast between modern AI and Jyotish, we must first reframe that term AI. What AI might mean in a deeper metaphysical register. Let us propose the following. Jyotish is the original AI, but not in the sense of artificial intelligence, though in some sense it is also. Rather, it is a study of the architected interface, the structure of reality as it appears to an incarnated, embodied, and conditioned being. The birth chart is not a symbolic toy, it is a psychocosmogram, a diagram of how awareness is configured as a particular experience of self, bound by a karmic field. The grahas are not mythic metaphors or arbitrary constructs, they are ontological operators, the intelligences through which Prakriti organizes the flow of conscious experience. Jyotish itself is sort of an artificial interface, an architected interface over the pure awareness that is available in universal consciousness. Over that, there's this phenomenal experience. It's a study of the phenomena, study of the hallucination, a diagram of how awareness is configured as a particular experience of self, a small individuated self. That's the little birth chart that we experience. This I as Sachin, who is having a certain likes, dislikes, attachments, aversions, and all kinds of things. So, this is a different kind of interface. The sun is not just the self in a chart, it is a structuring force of attention itself. The moon is not merely emotion, it is the rhythm of attunement, the liquidity of subjectivity in flux. Mars is not aggression, it is will in motion, resolution to react or reactivity embodied in time. Saturn is not delay, it is contraction, compression, the karmic residue pressing inward to stabilize perception. Rahu and Ketu are not shadows, they are thresholds, vectors of unconscious craving and transcendental withdrawal. So, for more on Rahu and Ketu, you should watch the Rahu Ketu file series. It has 8 lectures right now. I'm going to add more lectures soon. In this sense, Jyotish is not a descriptive tool, it is a diagnostic instrument, and more than that, a revelatory system. It reveals how attention, desire, karma, and embodiment coalesce to form the illusion of a fixed self, and then shows us through pattern time how that illusion can be gradually seen through. How can you see through the illusion? How can you see the script that you're running? The artificial intelligence that you're running. The real intelligence is hallucinating a certain experience. It is architected. So this is a kind of intelligence far more fundamental than what any machine currently simulates. It is psychometaphysical in nature because this system, this interface is not arbitrarily constructed. It is architected in accordance with Rit, the deep order of nature through which Kal, time, karma, causality, and Jiva, incarnated self, play out their interaction. Jyotish as the original AI. So this is something so profound, and I've always spoken of Jyotish in this sense of this code that we are running, this sort of software that we are all running, and we all have a certain configuration, a certain design, and based on that design, that configuration, we orient ourselves in different ways to reality, to the experience of everything in life. So, if modern AI organizes external data to produce usable outputs, Jyotish reveals how internal structure conditions perception, response, and bondage. It is not about using the system, it is about seeing the system. and thereby becoming disidentified from its automaticity, from its automatism. So when AI gives us is access to scale, synthesis, and speed, that's a typo. AI gives us access to scale, synthesis, and speed. What Jyotish gives us, what AI gives us is access to scale, synthesis, and speed. That's what AI gives us. But Jyotish gives us, when approached rightly, access to self recognition. We begin to see how dashas are not just time periods, but karmic archetypes unfolding in rhythm, in time. We see how yogas are not combinations but scripts of entanglement. We see that no graha strength matters if the person remains unconscious of how they are functioning through it. Here, we are reminded again Jyotish is not merely predictive, it is diagnostic, reflective, and ultimately transcendent. If we try to replicate this system through AI without understanding its purpose, we will replicate the calculation but miss the darshana. We will have the software, but not the insight, the heartfelt insight. The output are the outputs, but not the orientation. This is why Jyotish is not just a study of time, but a practice of liberation from time as well. It's what it gives us the problem statement. This is what pushes us to uh, get into the ideas of yoga and stuff. So it gives us the grammar of fate only to show us the space beyond grammar. In that light, it is both older and more advanced than anything we call artificial intelligence. This is so fascinating. If we understand Jyotish the right way, we'll realize it is both older and more advanced than anything we call artificial intelligence. So, yes, Jyotish is a system, but it is not a mechanical system. It is a cosmic interface. It can be a mechanical system, but that's not its purpose. It's a heartfelt, the ultimate result of that mechanical system, the script, the realization of the script is heartfelt. It is a cosmic interface through which conditioned being can come to recognize itself as unconditioned. The grahas are the original intelligence modules of this interface. They are not things to master, they are forces to enter, to understand, and eventually to outgrow. You can cultivate them, have a better relationship through them, through understanding. Until we realize that which is being read is not the chart, it is you, the reader. It is you, the seeker. It is you, the one who still believes you are inside a system, rather than the one who can become aware of it. Jyotish then is not a legacy code base to be optimized. It is a mirror made of time, calling the soul back to its timeless origin. It's realization of the idea of Jyotish. So, how will Jyotish now prepare us for AI? I know this is a long episode. I hope it's an interesting one. It starts the effort is to start a dialogue, a conversation in this direction with Jyotish and AI. The irony is stark. As artificial intelligence advances, it renders obsolete not only repetitive tasks and surface level cognition, but also reveals by contrast what cannot be automated, which we just discussed, what remains distinctly human, which will be a deep conversation we need to have. What makes human beings special in some sense? What access do we have that AI doesn't have? Conscious and karmically entangled beings that we are, the presence of AI, far from threatening Jyotish, may become its greatest teacher. So, AI will eventually teach Jyotish a lot of things by showing us what is missing when there is no soul. Far from threatening, Jyotish may become its greatest teacher by showing us what is missing when there is no soul. That's what AI will make us realize. We are entering a civilizational moment where the boundary between simulation and reality is dissolving. Digital beings can now role play empathy. Algorithms simulate seership, and machine generated interpretations are indistinguishable from the ones we ourselves offer. In this context, Jyotish must not retreat. It must evolve inwardly. We must evolve as human beings to keep that distinction between simulation and reality. This requires a reorientation, not just for prediction and performance optimization, but most importantly towards Jyoti, interiority, discernment, and ontological literacy. Because Jyotish can train the soul to see the difference between pattern and presence, explanation and embodiment. Not just not just explaining away, but having lived what is being explained away. Not just pattern, a code that you're running, but a presence that you have beyond the pattern, beyond the code. Symbol and reality. Symbols are pointing towards something more subtle, but that access to that subtleness, that reality itself, is what human beings have. Insight, which is wisdom of some sort, and transformation, that heartfelt transformation that makes wisdom worthwhile, the change it causes, the unstuckness that it creates. In that sense, Jyotish is not only a cosmological science, which I use very carefully. It's not yet a science, though. It's a discipline so far. It will eventually become a science if Jyotishis start doing the actual work required to do, that we should do. It is a spiritual inoculation against the disembodying tendencies of machine epistemology. It teaches us to stay with the real, even when the real is fragmented, painful, incomplete, and slow. It does so by demanding contact with the grahas, not as labels but as living forces, not just this label sort of, oh, you sat on Mars, I'm under the effect, this is what's happening. No, as living forces structuring your experience of reality. To understand Jyotish the right way, contact with the self, not as a concept but a conditioned process. Contact with time, not to control it but to undergo it consciously. As AI grows stronger in simulating what humans do, it will become harder to discern whether something was generated or realized. It is already happening, and it's very sort of uh, it's very sort of, how do I say, surreal in some sense. This blurring is not a technical issue; it is an ontological crisis. It is the moment when the masses will gladly trade insight for output. In this, it is in this moment that Jyotish offers a training in interpretation, but also in attunement, in analysis, but also embodiment, in insight, but also integration of that insight. The danger is not that AI will take over. The danger is that we will concede discernment. We'll give up our capacity to discern itself. That we will stop asking, who is speaking here? Where is this knowing arising from? Has this been lived or merely inferred? Is it pratyaksh or is it just shabda, just testimony, just anuman, inference? Or is it actual pratyaksh, actual direct experience of this Jyotishi? Are they just putting things into chat GPT and serving that to you? And when you question them, what does this mean? How do you know this? Like, let's make some sense of this. And they'll be out of fits because they have not practiced Jyotish the right way. So they should use AI, but not before studying Jyotish itself. They could use AI to study Jyotish itself, but the heartfelt experience of Jyotish itself, the cultivation of insight, wisdom through lived experience of life, the observations, the realization of Jyotish, not just as a commodity to scam people, which is so sad. That's what's happening with Jyotish, but as a philosophical view. Have you understood the philosophy of Jyotish itself? So, in other words, the danger is not simulation, it is disconnection that we'll feel. From that standpoint, Jyotish offers more than just knowledge of karma. It offers a philosophical immunity to the intoxication of machine generated certainty. This is very interesting. Jyotish is offering us a philosophical immunity to the intoxication of machine generated certainty, because it keeps asking the real questions. Who is the substratum of perception? How are we experiencing reality? What are we hallucinating? Hallucinating is what I was going to say. Who or what is perceiving? How is this entanglement structured? What happens when the perceiver becomes aware of being structured? First you study the structure, the components of the structure, then you realize that you're structured. Then you realize who is structured. And then you're like, I'm becoming aware of my structure as a design that I'm running, a code that I'm running almost. These are not questions AI will answer. These are questions AI will prevent us from asking unless we train ourselves otherwise. So Jyotish becomes not just a metaphysical discipline, but a civilizational safeguard. It's a missing method of metaphysics, is what I say. It puts you in contact with the subtle for you to then engage with subtle the right way. It reminds us that there is something in us that cannot be replaced, something that cannot be quantified, mimicked, or deployed via API. It is not our intelligence, it is our capacity to witness. That witnessing is not mechanical, it is sacred. That is why, and what is sacred will also come into question itself. That is why, in a world increasingly built on simulations, only those who have touched the real will reorganize it. So, Jyotish prepares us for AI by preparing us to remain human. Jyotish will keep us human, is what I am proposing if you study Jyotish. Artificial intelligence will continue to evolve, but the need for human connection will become more stark, not less. The need for touch, for contact with nature, with death, with devotion, with dharma, with the unsimulated presence of another soul. This will grow more urgent, more rare, and more luminous. Two worlds will emerge. There will be two kinds of two. A split will happen. Those who get identified with the simulation, those who deepen in silence and disidentify with the simulation. So there will be people who will enter simulated realities and will choose to stay there, and there will be people who would silence the people who will enhance phenomena, and people who will reduce phenomena, silence the mind, and transcend the mind. Some some of us will what we're doing with AI is creating a mind that is much better than the mind that we have, and our capacity to hallucinate that, they'll engage in that almost like a video game, and engage with that and get lost in that completely and engage in sub realities. And there will be people who will choose to reduce phenomenality, silence the mind, and go into higher states of awareness, sort of liberate themselves from this madness. Jyotish trains us for the latter. In the age of artificiality, only the awakened will recognize the light. In my view, this is the conclusion. The darkness of AI will only make light of awareness more starkly self evident. What it means to be human, this question will become more and more self evident as we'll take AI and push ourselves to an extreme. The spectrum will become clear, the opposites will become more and more clear. What it is to be a machine, what it is to actually feel, what does it mean to pretend to feel. So I know this was a long episode. Thank you so much if you're still here. And this was super stimulating for me to create this. It took me a couple of attempts to figure this out, how to say this the right way, how to start this dialogue the right way, with Jyotish and AI. And whatever arises, the questions, the ideas, comment, and we can get into a dialogue about these things. And thank you so much for watching this episode. I will see you in the next one.